千里之行，始于足下。A journey of 1,000 miles begins beneath the feet. We now gather in the Tao to travel the journey together. Welcome to Tao Talks with Eric Lin, where we take a deep dive into the Tao Te Ching by Lao Tzu. I would like to extend a warm welcome to you. Thank you for joining us. I would like to invite you to center your thoughts and direct your attention to this moment in time, to the here and now, to be fully present and mindfully aware as we all ready ourselves for this sacred process in the Tao with one another. Even for those who have some familiarity with the Tao, it is not as familiar as other metaphors, but it does come up quite frequently. We see it in Tao Te Ching 6. In lines 1 and 2, it says, the valley spirit, undying, is called the mystic female. So there it is again. It is the first iteration of the valley as a metaphor in the Tao Te Ching, but already we see the connection. The valley spirit is the mystic female. It is the yin aspect of the yin and yang symbol. And the same idea is also touched on in Tao Te Ching 15, not shown in this slide, but more specifically on the characteristic of openness, the receptivity, being welcoming to all. This, of course, leads to the ideal in the Tao that we should be nurturing and accommodating to everybody, just like the valley is to the myriad things. Looking further ahead, Tao Te Ching 32, we see lines 13 and 14. They say, the existence of the Tao in the world is like the streams in the valley into rivers and the ocean. This provides an overview of the world, humanity, and the Tao. This represents an image where the mountain streams flow into the river in the heart of the valley, and the river flows until it reaches the ocean. This is a poetic image with a multi-layer message, so we will circle back to it in the next slide to explore the various layers. For now, sticking to the topic of the recurrence of the valley image, we've got Tao Te Ching chapter 39, lines 5 and 6. The valley attained oneness and thus abundance. The myriad things attained oneness and thus life. This makes it quite clear the principle behind the flourishing and abundance is oneness, which in turn just means congruence, unity, and alignment with the Tao. It is the same principle that is the driving force of life. For the valley, the myriad things exist in harmony within nature. For us, it simply means when we bring ourselves into alignment, i.e., oneness with the Tao or unity with the Tao, we begin to see the same positive effects that lead to prosperity and abundance. Good things happen to us, and they happen seemingly out of nowhere. In reality, they originate from the Tao, exactly as a sage would expect. So, in your life, when you follow this particular path, you experience prosperity and abundance. You can get to a point where the more you bring benefits to others, to everyone around you, like the river providing water to the plants and animals, the more you do that, the more goodness and benefits come your way. Now, the reverse is equally predictable. In the same chapter, this chapter 39, Lao Tzu points out that if oneness is lacking, the valley will wither. This is when you veer away from the path, away from the Tao. The natural results of your departure from oneness may not be obvious at first, but over time, you will definitely notice, see, and feel the difference. Your life goes back to being as contentious as it used to be. You struggle in your daily existence. You become not so different from the people around you who do not know the Tao. This may be your cue to realize that the Tao may be subtle, but it definitely has a real and powerful effect on your life. It's an effect that you can feel in your bones. Lastly, we go to Tao Te Ching 66 with this mention of the valley. Lines 1 and 2. Rivers and oceans can be the kings of 100 valleys because of their goodness in staying low. So this is the last iteration of the image. It is an emphasis on humility in Tao cultivation. The reason why rivers and ultimately the ocean can be receiving of the goodness that flow into them is because of their lower position. So this means two things. One, for us in daily living, to be humble is to receive. We can observe this in the people who approach any subject from the perspective of humility and learning. They're the ones who learn and benefit from the lessons. Those who approach with arrogance instead of humility, they are not able to learn anything. And the other part of the meaning is that the highest should be the lowest. What that means is that the truly accomplished people should be the most down to earth. They are not always that way, but if they do not follow the Tao, their heights of accomplishments will be transient, will be impermanent. On the other hand, we observe how a lot of times people who proclaim themselves to be masters loudly talk about their mastery, they turn out not to be so masterful at all. But then those who remain quiet, friendly, approachable, well, they're the ones that can surprise you when their true mastery is revealed. So to encapsulate all of that, let me present this image of the valley. It's a way to see the totality of the concept. This is how a sage would envision it. This image shows mountains in the distance, between them a fertile valley with a river that flows through, winding its way through the heart of the valley. And here is how we can see the different layers of this metaphor. Let us start with the mountains. The valley is surrounded by mountains. They cradle the valley and protect it from the harsh weather. Since the beginning of life, a valley has always been a natural setting that becomes the preferred place to live for animals and humans. Naturally situated between mountains, the mountains will shield the valley from strong winds. They blunt the force of an incoming hurricane. This protective effect can make a huge difference, especially in primitive times. Metaphorically, we can map this to the environment for life, our lives. So the overall setting in which we live, imagine that as the valley, because we come into this world, we find the requirements of life are already present. They are all around us. Therefore, in a real sense, we are shielded and protected as well. Protected by whom? Well, the Tao gives us the air to breathe, the water to slake our thirst, the food to satiate our hunger, the sun to provide daylight and warmth, the earth to provide stability, and so on. You and I can survive physically in this world, and more than that, we can thrive, just like the myriad things in the valley. The next step in this metaphor would be the streams that flow from the mountains. Snow on the mountain peaks melt, and the purest and most refreshing water flow into streams. So since the beginning of life, we know that the mountains are not static. They undergo constant changes in the sense that every winter their peaks are covered in snow. Every spring the snow melts with providing the fresh water flowing downward through brooks, creeks, streams, and so on. It is almost as if the mountain wakes up from its wintry slumber. The mountain comes alive. We can map this metaphor to our lives. We can see the streams as goodness. The pure streams of water comes from elevations higher up in the metaphor, from the top of the mountain. That makes them perfect to represent the good things in life that we feel seem to come from above. We have expressions like manna from heaven or heaven sent to describe the same feeling. Goodness flowing into our lives from heaven high above. A couple of important points to note about this metaphor. One, the sources of goodness, the streams, they are always present. The mountain will always have many streams. Life will always have many sources of goodness for us. Sometimes I know when we feel hopeless, it seems like there's no help in sight. There's no help coming. Where are the streams of goodness? Well, just because we don't see them doesn't mean they are not present. It just means we're so trapped in misery that we are not able to take the steps in the right direction along the path to go to where the streams are so we can receive the goodness. So that's the first point. The sources of goodness are always there. We just have to learn to find them. The second point is that the goodness, the sources, just like the mountain streams, they are natural and they are inexhaustible. They never run out. The water from the streams will flow year after year. Natural goodness in life coming from the Tao. The Tao is an infinite source. The last part of this metaphor, we have the river. The streams flow down until they join together in the watercourse. They flow into the river in the heart of the valley, and the river goes through the valley, bringing benefits to all. So this is easy to see in nature. Smaller goodness join together to become a greater goodness. Sometimes we hear people talk about the law of attraction. This right here, what we're looking at right now, this is exactly how it works. More importantly, this is how we can have it work for us. Not just wish for the law of attraction, but to utilize the law of attraction actively. It's just another name for the goodness of the Tao. So as the river carries water throughout the length of the valley, wherever it goes, green plants grow. Greenness follows. Everything grows in profusion. Mapping this to life, this represents the Tao cultivator. Since ancient times, the Tao sages have observed the dynamics at play for the river and the cultivator. They emulate the characteristics of the river for their own lives. So their students follow what the sages have set as an example. They see that there are three important points. Number one, the river receives from the streams because of the lower position, as we have just talked about. That means humility is an absolute necessity if one wishes to receive goodness. Number two, the river gives its goodness to all living things, regardless of what they are. This too is representing the Tao, so cultivators, because of that, will be helpful to all without picking and choosing who should or should not be helped. And the third point is that once the river has nourished life along its banks, it continues to flow. It doesn't stick around. It doesn't stay to accept thanks. So Tao cultivators must be the same way, be unattached to the good works that they have done. They move on to the next task. So we can now add all of this together In the understanding of the valley, know the honor, hold to the humility, be the valley of the world. The valley encapsulates both knowing the honor, being able to see the peaks of the mountain, but hold to the humility, hold to the river in the center of the valley. Our meeting has come to an end, but the journey continues on. Until next time, may the Tao fill you with peace and happiness.